Hello everyone, my name is Nadia Lee Owens and welcome to Bi Black and Bookish, where a bi black girl who reads too much rants to her phone about things no one really cares about. And in this video, I'll be ranking the male and female protagonists of 5 books. Now I'm going to keep the boys and girls on their own ranking list at first, but once I'm done with those ranking lists, I'll merge it all together. I'm pretty sure it's just going to end up with all the ladies at the top because I'm a firm believer of, girl power and all that. And all the guys are just going to be wasting away at the bottom, but you never know. So with that being said, let's get into the first book. The Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires is about an upper middle class white housewife in the 90s named Patricia Campbell. Patricia lives in a suburban close-knit neighborhood that's all white, by the way, but that sort of goes without saying, where she is overworked, taking care of her difficult and frankly shitty kids and mother-in-law, while her husband Carter goes off to live his dream of being a successful doctor, even though, interestingly enough, Patricia also has medical training, and apparently this lady thought she should also add the torture of having to read Cry the Beloved Country for a book club with other overworked housewives. No disrespect to Mr. Alan Payton. Of course it fails, and Miss Patricia joins ranks with other outcast housewives to form their own book club, where they read like true crime books. Then this mysterious man moves into the neighborhood, and I don't want to give away the entire plot, but as the title implies, they suspect he's a vampire. Well, they think he's a drug dealer at first, and they try to get their husbands on their side, but they just write it off as women being hysterical. Those true crime books are making them paranoid. Meanwhile, people are dying, so the wives, led by Patricia, get shit done. Overall, I gave this book 3 stars on Goodreads because while I enjoyed the whole women bonding together and standing for themselves and the grotesque horror approach they took with the vampire, it kind of lost me when the story attempted to talk about the socioeconomic struggles of the Black community that lived only like a half hour from their own community. While I think the author's intentions is coming from a good place, I still don't find it to be very nuanced take on racism in the 90s. Like when the white main character goes to the Black neighborhood, he does rely a lot on negative stereotypes like the hostile Black teenage boys, the single mother welfare queen, and the Black woman that helps the book club is a sort of combination of magical Negro and mammy. And despite the fact that the vampire mainly targeted the Black community, they had to be saved by a white savior, Patricia, which is the reason why I rate Patricia at number 4. I hate the white savior narrative no matter how much my mom makes me watch Freedom Writers. As for the male protagonist, it was kind of hard choosing one because all the men were terrible, including Patricia's teenage son, who was definitely a future alt-right leader. In the end, I settled for Patricia's husband, Carter, who was a sexist, gaslighting piece of trash. Every messed up thing he did had me storming over to my roommate's room to yell at him just because this fictional man made me mad. So it goes without saying that Carter is going at the very bottom of the boys list at number 5. The second book we're talking about today is the inspiration for the Broadway classic Wicked, The Life and Times of the Wicked Witch of the West. Now you may be thinking to yourself, oh Nadia, I know the plot of Wicked. Everyone knows the plot of Wicked. And I'll say, no, you don't. The book was so completely different from the musical that there were times I just wanted to give up on it and listen to the entire Wicked soundtrack for the 100th time. So I ended up giving it 2 stars. In contrast to the musical, the book doesn't focus on the relationship between Elfie and Glinda/Galinda, which is the biggest disappointment if you're coming straight from the musical. Instead, it's mainly focused on Elfie sprinkled with weird point of view jumps to characters, most of which aren't that important to the story or to me. Apparently 2 of the characters were gay, and I didn't even notice or care. The book starts from her conception, where her mother was drugged and assaulted by a traveling potion salesman who may or may not have been the wizard, and ends with her mostly accidental murder at the hands of Little Miss Dorothy. And I honestly feel as if most of it could have been cut out. Like, why do I need to know that Elfie's mom had an affair with a glass blower, or that a few of Elfie's classmates went to an orgy? Also, another disservice to the book compared to the musical is that Elfie isn't nearly as likable. In fact, she's kind of a bitch. Like, I get that she had a difficult childhood and she's an outcast dedicated to the radical capital A animal rights, but that's no reason to treat her son like trash, who she doesn't even remember giving birth to, and berating a little girl who sure was told to assassinate her, but really wants to apologize. So I have to put Miss Elphaba at number 5. Yes, even lower than the white savior. Now, I had the similar issue selecting a male protagonist like I did with Southern Book Club, but not because all the men were trash, even though, yeah, they kind of were, but because none of them seemed to matter. I ended up with Prince Fiero, who was the male lead in the musical, but in the book he just was there to have an affair with Elphaba and knock her up. And I think it's because of his very singular purpose and sort of no other personality trait that I'm putting him straight in the middle at number 3. Our third book is one that I actually really liked, and if it wasn't for the sort of lackluster ending, I would have given it the full 5 stars rather than 4, is My Sister the Serial Killer. I don't really want to give away too much of the plot because I highly recommend it. It's such a fun read, but as the title suggests, it centers around Coretti, whose little sister Aola, I believe I'm pronouncing that right, is a serial killer. Coretti is a hardworking, strict nurse and is seen as pretty unattractive when compared to her drop-dead gorgeous sister. But despite the jealousy between them, Coretti is pretty dedicated big sister, seeing as how she always comes running when Aola inevitably kills her current boyfriend and needs help getting rid of the body. While Coretti is concerned about her sister's quote-unquote habits, she doesn't really do anything until Aola turns her sights on Tad, a doctor who works at Coretti's hospital and is also her crush. I'm going to put Coretti at number 2 because I do respect the lengths she went to protect her ungrateful sister, because I too will hide a body for my ungrateful siblings, even though I would limit it to 1 body each. But she doesn't quite reach the number 1 spot because I thought she had such low self-esteem that she let everyone manipulate and use her, including but not exclusively her sister. While I very much empathize with Coretti, I would be the one who's a serial killer if people treat me the way they treated her. One person I thought wouldn't treat Coretti like garbage is our male protagonist, Tad, who was a huge disappointment, just like every man in my life. When we were first introduced to Dr. Tad, I really liked him. He seemed to genuinely care for Coretti, but not in a romantic way that she hoped, but he still seemed to like her. But as soon as he meets Aola, it's like he was under her spell and he focused solely on her, and Coretti's attempts at warning him went null. It just really pissed me off how vain Tad turned out to be, so I'm putting him at number 4. A Darker Shade of Magic is our 4th book and is the first of the pretty popular new/young adult fantasy series Shades of Magic by V.E. Schwab? ? I have only read the first 2 books of this series. I'm saving the last one for our video in the near future, and by the near future I mean my next video, which I will be next month. So I don't want to get too in depth. All you need to know is that it is set in London, where there are 3 Londons known as Red, Gray, and White. There was once a Black London, but it got essentially consumed by the magic that powers Red London, causes power struggles in White London, and is seemingly non-existent in Gray London. Our male protagonist, Kel, is from Red London, and he is one of the last of his kind that have the ability to travel between these 3 Londons. While he is supposed to be a good boy and only be relaying correspondence between the royals of each respective London, he does a little interdimensional smuggling on the side, and it's because of his little side hustle that he fucks up big time when he gets this very powerful relic from Black London. While in Grey London, he gets pickpocketed by female protagonist Lila. The two of them eventually join forces to put the relic back where it belongs in Black London. I actually ended up really liking the first book and gave it 4 stars. The world building was great, and I liked the magic system the author created. The main problem I had with A Darker Shade of Magic was with its characters, which I found very dull, especially Kel and Lila. Kel has that whole brooding, no one understands me, so I have to push everyone away thing that I find kind of annoying and you see everywhere in the YA scene. His feelings of alienation are more valid in the second book, so I found him a little bit more likable, but unfortunately the second book was awful, but that's a conversation for the next video. I did think his relationship with his adoptive brother Rai was really cute. The biggest disappointment for me, though, was Lila, who suffers from the infamous not like other girls syndrome. There aren't a lot of other female characters that aren't mother figures or villains, but whenever Lila is around other women, she's quick to demean them for their femininity and their inability to be as quote-unquote tough as her. As a recovered not like other girls girl, there are usually 3 reasons for this syndrome, and that is internal misogyny, low self-esteem, and or repressed homosexuality. Coupled with that and her tendency to cross-dress, I really expected Lila to at least be bi and make out the tailor lady they meet later on, but so far nothing, so I'm led to believe that the reason she acts the way she acts is because of the internal misogyny and or low self-esteem. Also, the romance between Lila and Kel was predictable and a little boring, so I'm gonna rate them at number 3 and number 2 respectively. Our final book today is A Princess Theory, which is a contemporary romance book, a part of the Reluctant Royal series by Alyssa Cole. Unlike the previous books, I listened to the audiobook for this one because I prefer listening to romance novels rather than actually reading them in the traditional way. Not because I look down on romance, but simply because I think most romance novels, especially contemporary, have this sort of formula that all books follow. All books follow the genre formula, but it's easier to follow as an audiobook rather than books like The Starless Sea, which I did make that mistake. Anyway, A Princess Theory was great as an audiobook and I highly recommend it. The plot I once described to a friend is basically Coming to America, the first one, but pro-feminist. It even has all the same beats. A rich African prince is, in this case, the sexy sole heir, the Biso of a fictional country called the Solo. Said prince coming to America, specifically New York, to find a wife. The prince faking his identity to get close to his love interest, who is a hardworking New Yorker. In A Princess Theory, Naledi Smith is a med student who has to support herself because she's an orphan and she has no other family. Naledi thinks the Biso is a guy named Jamal, and he gets hired and fired in one night because that's how off he is at customer service. Eventually, the prince's true identity is revealed and makes the love interest resent them. Unlike in Coming to America, the Biso's identity was revealed in a very public way, and I felt for my girl Naledi. You would think that all these similarities to a movie from the 80s would make me like the book less, but no. I love Coming to America and I love this book. I actually think that this book being written by a woman makes it better than Coming to America, because I'm sure we are all aware of how Eddie Murphy's comedy from back in the day had some issues with how he talks about women, and Coming to America was no exception. But like with My Sister the Serial Killer, Princess in Theory had an unsatisfactory and rushed ending, so I ended up giving it 4 stars as well. But despite the poor ending, Naledi and the Beasto were very likable. Naledi was a hardworking and resilient despite all the pressures and lack of support from family she had. And she learned to have a backbone when dealing with passive aggressive misogynoir in the workplace that I can relate to as a Black woman and esteem myself. Prince the Beasto wasn't so bad himself, even though he did mislead Naledi for the first half of the book. He turned out to actually be a very caring guy for Naledi and his people of the solo. He also turned out to be a very attentive lover. I feel as if there was a time in straight erotica where it barely focused on female pleasure, and even in real life there are some straight men who have zero clue on how to pleasure a woman. But my man, Prince the Beasto, did not have that problem when he finger banged Naledi on an old Puerto Rican lady's couch and later on fucked her in a cave. The sex scenes were pretty fun. So I'm putting both the future king and queen of the solo at number 1. Well, there's the male and female protagonist ranking. The Wicked Witch of the West, Miss Elphaba from Wicked, and a shitty 90s husband, Carter Campbell, from the Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires at the bottom. A white savior / vampire slayer, Patricia Campbell from the Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires, and the next victim for a serial killer, Tad from My Sister the Serial Killer at number 4. The cross-dressing wannabe pirate, Lila Bard from A Darker Shade of Magic, and the horny Prince Fioro from Wicked at number 3. The person we would all want to call when we need to hide a dead body, Nurse Coretti from My Sister the Serial Killer, and the heterochromia magician Kale from A Darker Shade of Magic at number 2. And finally, our sexy royal African couple, Naledi and the Beasto from A Princess in Theory at number 1. Now it's time for our boys and girls to mingle and see who would fall, who would maintain their position, and who would rise. I am going to keep Carter Campbell at the bottom at number 10. It's where he belongs. For number 9, I'm going to place Tad. He shouldn't have done my girl Coretti dirty like he did. Number 8 and number 7 is going to be the male and female protagonists from Wicked, Fioro, and Elfie, respectively. Sorry to the musical, but the book did not do these characters justice. Miss Patricia Campbell takes number 6. Number 5 and number 4 goes to the most middle road characters in this list, and that is Kale and Lila Bard. Maybe they'll have such amazing character growth in the last book of the Shades of Magic series, but for now, they're kind of boring. Prince of the Beasto is at number 3 because I too want to be finger banged by a hot, rich African prince on some old lady's couch. My girl Coretti is number 2. I wish nothing but the best for her, and I hope she learns to stand up for herself. That leaves my med student New Yorker queen, Naledi Smith, to take her rightful place at number 1. That's the ranking. Let me know if you agree or disagree with my opinions on these books and their protagonists in the comments, or follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Nadia Owens. Hope to see you next month when I talk about the Shades of Magic series. Bye!